Like to welcome you back. I am John Henson, and this is TarHeel247, a UNC basketball podcast. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. On this week's show, we're talking recruiting, and there's no one in the industry that I want to hear from more and talk about recruiting than the OG. I mean, he has notes on me, and he recruited, he had emails and things that he looked up for me in 2007. The OG of recruiting himself, 24/7 Sports National Basketball Recruiting Director, Eric Bossi. Let's welcome him in.
What is happening, my man?
Hey, time flies, right? Like just from being at these events that you go to now to I'm 34 years old. I don't want to make you feel old, but
I'm old. It's okay.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it really has. I saw you back in April at the Final Four, and we had a brief conversation, but now it's really like a full circle moment right here coming together, going back to, I think the first time I saw you play was May of 2007. You were with the Texas D1 Ambassadors playing at the Jayhawk Invitational in Lawrence, Kansas. I think it was myself. Dave Tellup was there that week.
Tellup, my guy. Love Dave.
Justin Young, who was working for Rivals at the time, was kind of us three. Kind of just really stumbled into you. I don't really think you had much of a national profile yet, but we all saw you, and it was pretty crazy. What was that time like for you?
I remember, I think we played Athletes First. I don't know if that's the game you guys saw. And I was like Daniel Orden, Xavier Henry, and Terrence Boyd, and Kyle Hardrick. And I remember that was probably the game where I think people started to realize kind of who I was. But that team was so stacked. So that's what I remember from Kansas. That team just having all those pros. It was a fun time.
Yeah, what was your? I'm going to read you my initial evaluation of you here in a second. But what was your? What kind of player did you think you were at that time?
I was coming into my own. I had grown like 6 inches, so I was just starting to develop. People don't know, I came in high school as a 3-point shooter, and obviously I grew and developed into something. I started dunking. That was the worst thing ever happened to me. And that's kind of where the game changed. And I can't think of what I thought, but I do know that I never thought about the NBA. I never thought about college. I was very present and in the moment. So that's all I can remember is just playing those games. And then all of a sudden after the game, guys are coming up to me like, oh, man, you're going to be ranked in this school and that school. And I'm like, oh, thanks. I was out there having fun.
Yeah, so here's what I wrote. I wrote playing for Texas D1 Ambassadors, John Henson, 6'8.5" power forward from Round Rock, Texas. Skinny big man, is more advanced offensively than he is defensively. Runs well, shoots a nice jumper with a very high release to 17 feet, and has good touch around the basket. A good, not great leaper who gets pushed around and probably doesn't weigh more than 185 pounds. Has a lot of talent but needs time to develop physically. High major. Where are we feeling about that early eval?
I love the early eval because it's funny. I turned into a defensive presence. So my defense kind of, and that, what people don't realize is I had to kind of mold to my situation in the NBA because I wanted to get paid. And my coach said, you need to play defense. And that's kind of what I did. But a lot of people don't realize offensively what I was before kind of the NBA. But I think that's also owed to my adaptability. Hey, look, I could go out there. I had games where I scored 15, 20. I think that was more, people don't realize that until they kind of see back in the past, oh, wow, offense was kind of offensively was his first kind of legs in the game. So it's so interesting to see. But you were spot on, man, early, So
yeah, I in my next one, you went to the Nike Elite 100 in June, a couple months later, the underclassmen All-American camp. And I compared you to Channing Frye. That's really, I really thought you were. I thought you were like another Channing Frye. I thought you're going to be, a face-up scorer and everything like that. And I know you played some out on the wing while you were at Carolina. So obviously Coach Williams saw that. I don't know how much time you've had a chance to, or how much of a chance you've had to be around the grassroots circuit in its current form. I was just curious to see, from your perspective, having been through that grind, been recruited, played in the NBA at the highest level. What's the biggest changes you've seen over these last 15 to 20 years?
I'll say the biggest change is we didn't have social media. We didn't have any of this hype type of things. You had to go out there and I didn't know if Bossi was watching, Coach Williams was watching, Michael Jordan was watching, right? We just had to go play. And there's so much hoopla around the game now. You just don't, kids are not in it for the same reasons as we were. Like, I remember taking a van from Texas. I mean, mind you, I'm a top prospect from Houston to Phoenix. We drove to LA and back. Like, kids aren't doing that these days. And so I think that's the biggest difference is just I think it's easier to find prospects because of the being able to see everyone and have so many people around. But just going out there, man, game to game, like it's your last game and not knowing who's in the stands and playing hard. You know, I know kids that their handlers hold them out of games and they're not playing today. And they're so like, we didn't have a choice. I went to Oklahoma State team camp. Hey, look, we got to go to this tournament. It was a local tournament. I played against the local kids. I played against the national kids. So I think we missed that element of just getting out there and playing basketball and not knowing who's around and not, okay, well, Coach Davis is here today and Duke's here in Kentucky. Like, okay, let me turn it up today. So I think that's the biggest difference.
Yeah, that's spot on. I think there was a lot less pressure on you guys from the outside. You know, there weren't as many people trying to get a hold of you. And there's some good to that. You know, these kids can build brands, and obviously with NIL and everything, that's important. But also, like, it seemed like you guys had genuine rivalries. Like, all you could see was like once every 6 months a ranking list, and you guys seem like, oh, okay, someone thinks Tiny Gallon is better than me in my own state. Like, I need to show them what's up.
Yeah, and we used to, like, I remember when they matched me up against Renardo Sidney, like, I was nervous as hell because I'm like, you know what? This is my only opportunity. And we know one game doesn't matter, but it does, right? And I remember it being like, you know, the pundits and rivals like, look, this is the matchup. Whoever wins this matchup is going to be the best power forward in our class. And I was so scared because he's, you know, Renardo Sidney at the time, people don't know, he was the first stretch big I'd ever saw. Like, he was before his time.
Yeah, he was a bad boy.
I played well. And you know what? I think that element gets missed because now, right, you know, we can get the high school teams to go against each other. We can kind of match up stuff. When back in the day, like you said, hey, look, I might see Ronaldo and DeMarcus Cousins twice, put up or shut up. And we miss that element sometimes with just having so much access to everyone. So super interesting. I got a question for you, actually, before we get into Tar Heels. I want to know, what a day in your life, like at the Peace Gym, you wake up, I want to know from breakfast to the end of what kind of is your day like as a national recruiting director for a major site?
Yeah, so that's really changed over the years. Because it used to be I just kind of woke up and you know, winged it. Like, you know, let me get in the gym. And because, you know, when I started off, I didn't have the responsibilities of, you know, leading in networks coverage and things like that. So that's changed. So generally before any event, I now have become pretty religious about trying to map out what my schedule is going to be. And frankly, it's a lot easier now. You know, back in your day when you guys played, you had a couple pool play games and then you got into bracket play. And once you lost, your weekend was done. There's not very much bracket play anymore. So I'm able to look at a schedule for a weekend and I know the exact 5 times that any player is going to play. So I'm able to go through and then say, okay, who have I seen most recently? Who do I need to see? You know, who's someone that a coach has been hyping up to me? And I'm able to schedule out what I need to see. And then also on that, you know, say it's a live period, it's really important for us to track the coaches. So I want to make sure that I'm as much as possible at the games where the players that have the relative interest of our subscribers are going to be playing, so that they can know, you know, who is Hubert Davis watching, who is John Calipari watching, who is John Shire, Bill Self, whoever watching. Like, that's what people want to know, right? So I have to factor that in my schedule while also leaving time. Okay, I need to get over and see a couple 15U games. I need to see a couple 16U games. And it's a lot harder than people realize. And also now we've got all of these event places that have 6, 8, 10, 12 courts. You know, back in the day, a lot of these games were on a single high school court.
Yep.
So you could focus. And that's the biggest thing that I've learned is I've got to really be as good as I can at focusing in on what my plan for the day was. Otherwise, there's just so much eye candy going on that you get lost with looking around or wandering around from game to game, and you don't really get the same feel that you do. And I see it. Like, I see a lot of young guys, and I'm not saying they're wrong for this, but it just seems like they're walking laps around the event all day long. And then you see at the end of the day, you see eye catchers and you see 75 kids listed. And it's like, no, there's no way that many guys made an impression on you if you were actually like evaluating. So there's a lot that goes into it, but I've certainly grown over the years and I've gotten a lot more, detail focused and committed to a schedule during the course of a day.
Yes, and since we're kind of talking recruiting, my story with Carolina, this doesn't happen anymore, right? Because you just said there's no pool. Coach Williams said he saw me just walking through the gym. He just walking through the gym. He said he saw the smile on my face. He just sat down and he just watched for a second. He said he saw enough. He said we need to go after that kid. I love those type of stories. It just doesn't happen like that anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's fun that sounds like the most Coach Williams thing ever. Especially saying they like the smile on your face and everything like that. I was looking through my notes. They came through and saw you during September at your school, and on September 20th of 2007, he told your high school coach that you had an offer. I did an article with you on it. You seemed pretty excited about it, and then I talked to you again after your official visit. We talked on Christmas Eve of all times. I remember my editor was like, "Really? They want you to talk to him on Christmas Eve?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's what his dad told me to do. And you were always really easy to get a hold of." Yeah. And we talked, and I got off the phone. I was like, "Oh yeah, that guy's done." And then you committed like a little bit over a week later.
Man, I got a funny story, and then we'll get into Carolina. So I come out of high school practice, right? And I've never told this story. I come into the office. Rick Barnes is sitting on the couch. Coach Izzo, Roy Williams, and I think maybe one more. Coach K, right?
Oh wow!
They're all sitting on the couch. Hey, how you doing? Whose hand do I shake first? Right. So I walk in the office. I scan the room. I go shake Coach Williams' hands first, and apparently that pissed off all the coaches in that room. But I was put in a rough situation. What am I supposed to do? But Carolina was my favorite at the time, so that's what I did. And I can specifically remember that souring Coach K a little bit and a couple of those legends in the room. So I'm glad I chose Carolina. Man, they might have held that against me.
Yeah, I mean, what do you do in that situation? Say, hey, I'm going to shake your guys' hands in alphabetical order. Hey guys, we're going right to left here. There's no favoritism being played.
I mean, it was at the time I just went straight to Coach Williams naturally. But I'm going to tell you, after that fact, I could feel the tension in the room. I mean, these are all Hall of Fame type guys. So, funny story for everyone out there. So let's look at this class of 2026 recruits. Get your thoughts on the incoming class as well. First up, the crown jewel of the incoming class, Caleb Wilson. Can you tell me what he is bringing to the table for these Tar Heels?
Yeah, I think he's going to bring something that we haven't seen in a few years. He's an elastic athlete who's really versatile. I think his biggest impact early is going to be on the defensive end. He's an elite defender who can really switch up and down a lineup. If he gets caught, you don't have to strictly play him as like a drop coverage guy. Like he can get out and hedge, and he can move his feet and stay with the guard for a little while. So that's going to get him on the floor early, and I think provide a lot of value. But I also think that there's some real offensive potential with him. He can really rim run from one end to the other. I think he can put the ball on the floor a little bit. And what I like is that he doesn't waste a bunch of dribbles. He knows, all right, if I can't get where I need to be in a couple dribbles, I need to go ahead and pass the ball, relocate, do what I need to do. He's got a nose for the ball. I think the jump shot's coming along. It's with so many of these young guys, it's just going to be a matter of how he adjusts to the physicality of the level of basketball he's going to be playing at North Carolina first. But he's a stud. I fully expect he'll be a one and done. This guy's got lottery pick written all over him. And I think it's going to be, if he does what I think he's capable of, I really think it's going to be huge for not only Carolina, the program, but also maybe some of the perceptions with Hubert Davis on, one and done type of guys. And, for whatever reason, it doesn't seem like anyone wants to give him a lot of credit for Caleb being their main priority in that class and then beating off a lot of really good programs to get him. So, he's important on a lot of fronts, not just games this year, but, the future on the recruiting trail and thing like that. I think he's going to be huge for him.
Yeah, the athlete is so funny because, even today, I think what you do is even more important because now I could just post some clips and I could look like I'm all world, right? So it's so important to look at these recruiting sites because anybody can look like an all-star on the internet. So, the clips I saw of him, I especially saw a couple clips where he was handling and distributing and shooting online. I hope that translates, because if he can do that for this Carolina team, I think, sky's the limit, and it could dispel some of these kind of fears of putting out, high-level pros or highly picked pros per se for Carolina.
Yeah, and it's like you say, it totally changes the ceiling for them as a team this year. So I really do think, though, like with any of these guys, will probably a couple early growing pains, but I think by the time we start getting to Christmas time, conference play, I really think he's going to be a force. I'm super excited about Caleb.
Next up, one of my kind of favorite younger guys in the class actually coming in, Derek Dixon. Give me your thoughts on his game.
He's mature. He plays a mature game. I think that's probably what stood out to you, is he not a guy who just has to rely on out athleting guys or being this herky jerky guy. He takes what's given to him in the course of a game. He's smart. He's polished. He's clearly been very well coached on the high school level, and he just has a good feel for the game. I think he's a thinking basketball player, and then you add on top of that he can shoot. I think that really helps, because when you come in as a freshman, you're getting so much thrown at you, right? And you're coming from a situation generally where you're really allowed to do whatever the hell you want at the end of the day by most high school coaches for these guys. Even the guys who are being pushed some, that's the end of the day, they know, hey, the ball's going to be in my hands to make a play. And so adjusting to playing in a system and not being that guy is tough for some of these guys. But for a guy like him who plays a skill-based game, who plays a cerebral game, I think that transition is a little bit easier. And I think that he's going to be, a really valuable piece for them with his ability to stretch the floor. And also, I'm not sure he's going to be a primary playmaker, but a secondary playmaker and a guy to ease the load of, Kean Evans or Seth Trimble or whoever else is handling the ball.
Yeah, I think he's just going to be a solid kind of piece. Just to come in and buoy the corpse and, maybe come in and have some good games and just kind of set everyone down. And he can shoot the ball. That'll kind of be a theme in our, talking about recruits. They all can shoot the ball at a decent rate. So I'm excited about him. And last but not least, Isaiah Denis. Give me your thoughts on his game.
I'm a big Isaiah Denis guy. I think he's probably the most raw right now, and he can be a little bit wild at times, but that guy, he's got another gear to him. I think he brings some juice in the backcourt and is a little bit of a different style guard than anyone else on the roster. So he provides a change of pace. He's long, he's twitchy, he can get to the rim, but also that guy can shoot the ball. He's maybe a bit streaky, but I've seen him go on runs, and once he understands shot selection a little bit better and adjusts and adds a little bit of strength so he can play through some contact, I really think that's a guy that can really, really surprise some people.
You're 92nd percentile in contested shots made this summer. So that kind of aligns. A long athlete. I saw some clips of him, some games. I think his potential, I think this is a really good high potential guy that down the line, man, could be big for this Carolina kind of team, especially if they start losing guys or injuries happen. Now, Carolina's had a few misses in the class of 2025. They've invested a lot into the recruiting infrastructure in order to reel in more of the big fish. In my notes, I say investments and competitive on the recruit. Where's the money reside? Talk to me about what's going on with the NIL there.
Yeah, well, obviously, now you've got the revenue share, which I think, which is pretty good, because I'm sure that, you got Bill Belichick on the football side. I'm sure he wanted a lot, but in an era where most major programs are heavily putting it in the football bucket, if they're going to be at that 7-ish number, they're going to be on the high end, just on the revenue share. There'll maybe be a couple places higher than them. There's been a reported number that maybe Kentucky's going to be in the 9 million range on revenue share, but 7 on revenue share alone is big. And that's going to allow them to, while we're still trying to figure out what's happening with collectives and things like that, and they're not going to go away. They're going to tweak things however they need to tweak. But that puts you ahead of the game, because all right, we for sure have this much to work with. When some of these programs we're recruiting against, we know they only have a guaranteed $4 million to work with, or in some cases only $3.2 million. So I think that's going to be a big benefit. And I don't think we've gotten to the point where too many of the guys that they're on are talking like serious numbers yet. But I think ultimately that those numbers are going to help them. At the end of the day now, it's changed from your time. In your time, you want to go out on campus, have a good time, connect with a coach. Yeah, they still want to do that. But now the negotiation, man, it's all about the negotiation here. And I think Carolina has positioned themselves much better than they were a couple years ago. And, we saw that, you saw Hubert Davis talking to donors last winter saying, hey, this is really important. You bring in Jim Tanner, you kind of change the infrastructure of the program a little bit. I think they've done a great job of adapting. And I think, for a guy who's at his core, an old school guy with Coach Davis, I think he deserves some serious credit for being willing to adapt, change his way. And I think if you look at how many guys they have visiting campus, people are going to get caught up in, well, which ones do we lead for? Which ones will, don't worry about that as much. When was the last time you saw this many high-level guys locked in with official visits to Carolina? So that's a great sign that things are going in the right direction and that people see something that has them interested. And clearly there's been enough base level conversations with agents that, you feel like Carolina can compete in these recruitments.
Yeah, I kind of just think of, the recruiting trail and how money's involved and it's a little easier to get the top guys to come to campus when you say, look, we've got X amount of dollars. If it gets in more serious, if you then we can start talking numbers, or maybe they have talked numbers and say, look, we've got this much. Because, truth be told, especially with a guy like Caleb Wilson, right? I heard they had to renegotiate. I heard those rumors. Don't know if they're true or not.
I think you're pretty well sourced there too.
Yeah, I might be a little well sourced. So hey, look, if you really want a guy, or say you miss on a couple guys, hey, you might have to come and up that offer, and ultimately, that could get better prospects at the school. So yes, the NIL kind of stinks because it does take the shine off a school like Carolina as a basketball school. But if we've got the money and the shine, now we're talking.
Yeah, absolutely.
So next, we're going to go over to the players that we're actively recruiting in the class of 2026. First up, five-star forward Tajh Ariza, son of former NBA vet Trevor Ariza. He's a number 9 prospect ranked in the class, scheduled to have a visit on Friday, the 12th of September. What's his latest on his involvement, and why does he look like a reincarnated clone of his dad?
Yeah, it's funny. Man, those when you're 6'8", almost 6'9", long, and just like one of the things that really sticks out to me are like easy movers. Like he's an elite mover. Like he changes directions, east and west. He gets off the floor. Like it's just everything is so natural to him. I think he's one. I think Carolina has a really good shot with Tajh. From speaking to him, speaking to his agent, I think he developed a really good connection with Hubert Davis at USA Basketball when Coach Davis was a court coach. And Tajh is a very low key guy. He's not a big self promoter, glitz and glamour kind of guy. I mean, all these guys got a little bit of this stuff going on, but he's pretty quiet. And I think that he has a personality that matches. He's going to be at USC this weekend. He moved that visit up. Obviously, you always worry about a home school, and they're going really hard on attracting talent. And, they've had some NBA players' sons, not that they're equal recruitments, but, they had Bronny James. They've got Elijah Arenas Gilbert's son there right now. So they've seemed to maybe have found a niche with the children of NBA players in the area. But I also don't know how much staying close to home is really that important. I mean, he's moved around growing up. He spent a lot of time in North Carolina as a kid. Kansas is going to be a factor. They did just hire his former high school coach, Tony Bland, as an assistant. Certainly that's noticeable. I don't think that's a deal breaker for anything on this based on the conversations I've had. So it's one that I think he's going to arrive on campus with the Tar Heels having an honest shot of landing that one.
Yeah, I just watch his movements and I just see how he shoots the ball. I mean, genetics are crazy. And with the USC angle, especially the kids that are in LA, I mean, what better spot to go, right, than back to my dad's house who, made $100 million in the NBA, right? Like, it's not a bad place to be down the road from. So hopefully we can kind of pull him away from there. I'm glad he seems open. Next up is Anthony Thompson, five-star forward from Ohio, the 10th ranked prospect in the class. He visited Carolina this past weekend. Can you tell me if you've heard any intel on that and what's the latest on their recruitment with him?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a couple caveats on this. One, Carolina still has work to do here, but I would have said going into the visit, they were very much on the outside looking in. Now they've put themselves in the ball game, especially when we get down the road and we start to get a little bit more into negotiations. You know, I had been hearing Kentucky is kind of a team to beat on, and checking more sources, Kentucky's maybe not quite as in there as I had thought them to be based on what I heard. I think the real competition is shifting more towards Ohio State and Michigan. But from what I've heard, he spent a lot of time with Caleb Wilson on the visit. And it sounds like Caleb had some really positive things to say about Carolina, and that, in addition with the time that he spent with the coaches, really has him taking a harder look at Carolina. Now they're still going to have to, you know, keep leapfrogging their way up the thing, but this is one that they've gone from, oh, that's cool, I'll go visit Carolina. You know what? This visit kind of opened my eyes a little bit. You know, I need to be a little bit more serious about them. So that's, I think, overall positive visit.
That's what happened with me. I was like, let me see what Carolina. Oh, now I love it. So that's interesting. You know, I watched clips with him. I mean, he's a system fit. I got in my notes, he's a system fit. So he kind of runs the floor well. He finishes. He can shoot the ball. I could see him in a Carolina uniform. He's got a quick second bounce. Kind of your prototypical pro forward, man. Do you kind of see him in the same mode as a fit to Carolina? I mean, like I said, I love how he looks, how he would look.
So that guy's got an absolute ratchet. Like, he is a burner from deep. And so when you can shoot the ball like that, I think you're a fit anywhere. Yeah. But in terms of the type of spacing that they're looking to create moving forward, I think he could be an essential fit to that, because he does open up the floor. And man, if you like to play around with synergy a little bit, go look at his numbers on synergy, because they're ludicrous with his points per shot and things like that. Like, it's just, and now you look at a guy who's 6'8", long, lefty. He's also really young for the class. He just turned 17, I think, last week. So no one would bat an eye if he was in the class of 2027. And he just, you know, he looks like a baby deer right now.
Yeah.
You know, like, he's got a baby face. Like, that guy, when he starts to mature physically and get some man strength, like, he could be a problem. But that guy is a prototypical NBA jump shooter prospect. Like, I hate to say it like this, but I think things are going to have to go very badly for him to not play in the NBA someday.
I agree. I saw clips. I watched some stuff on YouTube. I was like, 10th. That's it, right? That's what I thought about in the class. Next, we're going to go 5-star power forward Cameron Williams out of Arizona, 11th ranked prospect in the class of 2026, scheduled to visit Chapel Hill on November 7th. What's the lowdown on Carolina's pursuit with him?
Yeah, so he's one that everyone fell in love with this summer. He's a guy that I've really liked since seeing for the very first time at an underclassmen camp in June of 2023. He was 6'7" at the time. He was skilled. You could tell that, you know, he had these long arms and his thin frame that he was going to grow into, but he could shoot and he could run and he could catch. And when you can do those three things at a young age as a big man, you're way ahead of the curve, whether or not you need to add weight, whatever. And he's gotten bigger. He's almost 6'11" now. He's continued to have that skill. You know, this recruitment is going to be a dogfight. We're talking about a kid, you know, I hate to be on a Carolina podcast and say this, but he has publicly mentioned Duke as a dream school before. So you have to factor that in, and you have to factor in that Arizona has been on him tough since early on. And, you know, Tommy Lloyd is kind of broken through on the recruiting front. You know, he landed Braden Burries and Koa Pete, 2 5-stars last year, and they put themselves in position this year to make another splash. So I think that those are probably the two schools that everyone's chasing right now. And, you know, also, you know, he's got a lot of visits between now and that Carolina visit. So you got to try and keep that guy warm and hope that he doesn't get worn out through the visit process.
You know, this is a Carolina podcast, but I did take a visit to Arizona. And so I can't be mad at him. I'm just going to tell the folks at home that I'm not going to be mad. And he's, you know, if a local kid, that's going to be tough. But hey, look, there's a reason why kind of Carolina's, as you see, they're going after these forwards throughout the class. And that kind of brings up us next to Tony Bryant, who's a local kid. I've seen him play a lot. His coach is one of my best childhood friends, which nobody knows that. So Zach Reynolds, that's a guy I grew up with playing. We used to share shoes, work out together, fight because he's 6'8" and we used to play against each other. So Tony Bryant, 5-star power forward out of Tampa, as we just spoke about, 13th ranked in the class, scheduled to start a Carolina visit Monday, September 1st. Tell me about his recruitment and the process of him, getting to Carolina. If there's a high chance, or he's kind of cool on us.
That's wild that you go so far back with Zach. That's pretty funny. And Zach had some North Carolina ties too, because he spent some time at Mount Zion in high school before going to Northern Arizona for college. But Zach, I'm not surprised
Zach is Zach. I'm sure if you know Zach,
he can be a wild one on the sidelines. Let's say he's animated. We'll call him animated. That's a good way to put it. But
I'll be telling him to watch this because he's Zach is. I grew up with Zach, so I've seen this side of Zach. I'm happy for him to have Tony kind of as his. He coaches him in high school as well. So I always tell Zach, man, look, man, let the reins off. Tony's ready, man.
Yeah. So Tony, that's another one where there's probably still some work to do for Carolina. I think general perception is that Missouri is the early leader on him. NC State's making some noise there too. So I think those are the two. Arizona to some extent, but I don't think he has a visit set with Arizona yet. So I'm not buying that they're a major player just yet if he hasn't scheduled a visit. But I think he's a guy, another one who fits anywhere. Man, that kid can really run. He's bouncy as all get out. And if you've seen this from being around him, he has some real potential as a guy to stretch the floor down the road. I think you don't want to put the cart ahead of the horse and have him roaming the perimeter and shooting a bunch of jump shots just yet, because his finishing at the rim and his rim protection are his biggest strengths right now. But he's got that room to expand that game, and I think he's going to be another guy who's a highly switchable defender. So, there's going to be a lot of buzz on campus this weekend. You're talking about first game for Bill Belichick. It should be a pretty raucous environment. So they've got a chance to make a lasting impression. I think they probably know heading into it that they've got some work to do and that there's some chasing to do. But, again, you just want to get a guy on campus and see what happens from there.
Yeah, he checks all the boxes. And I think he's an underrated playmaker just from seeing him so much, which could be, a sneaky part of his game. And you said Mizzou has the lead. Obviously, Mizzou's probably going to have to pay, but that's probably more reason why they're in the lead than anything, in my opinion, humble opinion. So, a local kid, I wish the best for him. Would love to have him at Carolina. I think he goes well. Listen, anything I can do to push our name, I do it, but I do try to give him his space. And so next we're going to talk about Deron Rippey Jr. Is it Darren or Deron? Deron, okay. Yeah. So Deron Rippey Jr., 4-star point guard from New Jersey, 18th ranked prospect in the class, scheduled to start his visit to Carolina August 31st. I actually watched the whole interview with him and saw him, great kid. I like from Brooklyn. What can you kind of tell us about his recruitment and what's going on with him in Carolina?
Yeah, I think you talk about Coach Williams would have called him a Carolina kid. I think just personality-wise and the way he projects himself. Man, this dude has either 11 or 12 official visits set up beginning this weekend. And he's going to see Miami a couple days before he gets to Carolina. Starting with this weekend, he's only going to have one weekend between now and signing day, which I think is November 9th or something like that, where he will not be on an official visit. So he's got a lot of visits ahead of him. And this is one, man, John, him and his father is going to be really, really important in this one. Like some recruitment, you got to identify who you got to win over. I think dad is who you got to win over in this recruitment. Just based on my talking to coaches, because he's been so vocal and handled so much of it. They've done a great job of making every school feel like they're right there, but don't think they have a chance at the same time. Frankly, this one, no one's got a great feel for it. I think what's going to be interesting too, when these guys with these high level guys, especially at a position like point guard in this class, which there aren't a lot of great point guards. What's also going to make a big difference in this recruitment is, okay, Kansas and Kentucky are on them too. They're both heavy on Talon Kinney, who may be leaning towards Louisville. If that ends up being the case and Rippey's still out there, how much do they ramp up their, turn it up like you were talking about earlier? Like, well, we missed on this guy. We might need to devote a little bit more resources to this guy if we really want a point guard. So this one, I would say We're going to get to another one here in a little bit that I think is one of the most intriguing. He's probably got, of the elite guys right now, he may have the most mysterious recruitment going.
Yeah, I look at a point guard like himself, right? Like, call him Ron, New York guard, physicality, right? Could shoot the ball, made the first team All NBPA camp. He said UNC was a dream offer too, as well, which is interesting. If I'm a point guard, even a big man, and Carolina recruits me heavy enough, now I guess pays me to be the guy, I think it's a no-brainer because the point guard position in Carolina is such a polarizing position, but it's also a position that if you do play well, it's watched closely from pro personnel to people around the world. So, if he's listening or he watches this, you're from Brooklyn, your big city lights, like where else do you want to go to Carolina to show that you're one of the great point guards to come out of that school? Because if you aren't ready, then hey, look, it's okay. But I think he's be a good fit in the point guard spot. And yeah, I'm excited. He's like an All-American type of vibe. He's chiseled. He's got a nice demeanor about him. He's shooting 30. He shot 30% from three this year in Adidas circuit, which means he's got a budding shooting kind of skill set. So,
and that has been a big weakness of his heading in. It's always been, man, if he ever learns to shoot the ball, look out. And it's starting to come. And like you say, he's one of those guys. He passes the eyeball test in the layup line. When you see him, you're like, oh, look at this dude. And then when he hits the floor, he passes in. He's also, as good as he is offensively and putting pressure on the rim and getting paint touches, that guy has the potential to be arguably the top on-ball defender in the class. Like he's a demon on the defensive end when he decides to lock in.
Yeah, for sure. I see all that kind of, coming to fruition, man, with him. He's going to be really good. Next up, Cameron Holmes, 4-star forward from Arizona, 24th ranked prospect in the class, scheduled to start his visit to Carolina on September 19th. What can you tell us about his recruitment?
I think Arizona is the team to beat here heading into this. They're the local school. They've put a ton of work in with them, and I think it's resonating with him. He's got a visit set up with them for, I think, I want to say like December 5th or something like that, which is a long time from now. But he's another one who I think personality-wise kind of fits that Carolina kid mode in terms of, like, he's a really happy-go-lucky kid. He's a very low-key kid with quiet confidence. Just one of those guys that, like, when you see him, I've seen him around for years now. Like, he'll ask me how my family is doing and things like that. Like, there's not a lot of kids who are asking that kind of stuff. Like he'll know that we talked about, like, my daughter being a freshman in Chicago at school or something like that. Like, hey, how's college going for your daughter? So he's a special kid just in terms of his character. And so I can see why everyone loves him so much. But it's one where I think everyone knows entering the process that Arizona is probably going to be the team to beat.
Yeah, shifty, savvy lefty, solid wing with size. I mean, literally, that is what the program is today. So you can never have enough of those. I'm sure Carolina will get some. Just kind of depends. As you can see, they're going after all these guys.
Yeah, but it's things can change quickly, and he's got a different mindset. They're talking about a kid whose brother is in the NBA and went to Dayton before getting drafted by the Nuggets. And his brother, Duran, was a highly recruited guy. He was a top, 35, top 50 kid all throughout high school. So, he's getting some advice that, you don't have to do what people think you should do. You have to go with what fits. And I'm sure that's what they're going to try and sell. But it's, when we get on these things, we want to try and be as realistic as possible. Right. The tendency is, like, I want to come in and say, oh, Carolina leads for everyone, but that's not doing anyone any good. That's, because then people are going to be mad at me when that doesn't happen. But, again, we're talking about it's being in the game and having a chance. And as we're seeing, we're going over some big name guys, and that's a lot of guys to really get a chance to make a mark with. So, you have to like the chances that you have to try and change some guys' minds.
For sure. Next up, we're going to talk about Cole Cloer, who I love Cole. 4-star forward out of IMG, 25th ranked prospect in the class of 2026. Is 2025, is he in the class of 2025 or 2026?
26. These are all 26 guys.
Yeah, 26. Okay. Scheduled to visit Carolina on October 19th. What's the lowdown on him? I saw some video of him. I love him.
Yeah. He's probably, little bit of a Chandler Parsons type vibe with him as
Yeah.
a player. You know, a guy could play as a big three or as a stretch four, can really shoot the ball. He's a pretty poppy athlete vertically, and actually, you know, not bad. He's got a little bit of wiggle to him too.
Yep.
Good player, and he's one I think, you know, because he's from so close to Chapel Hill before heading down to IMG for his senior year. He's one that I think early on people kind of put in the unfairly in the, oh, that should be a layup for Carolina just because he's from right down the street. You know, I think Florida is going to be one to watch, UConn one to watch, NC State one to watch. But I think this is one, it's gone through some cycles. It went through he's going to go to Carolina. Everyone else is wasting their time. Then to the summer, there was a lot of Florida talk. And now there's getting to be some talk of some other schools. He's one I think that I wouldn't be surprised if by the time he gets back to Carolina for his official visit, that they've gotten themselves right back in the game a lot more on this. And they're going to have the opportunity to really learn what's hitting with him and what's not hitting with him on these visits when they talk to him after he visits another program, so that they can be locked and loaded and prepared to hit him with exactly what he's going to want to know about. So he's one that I think I kind of like their chances to kind of be sneaky and get right back up into the mix on that one.
Yeah, I was watching some stuff, and I watched all these guys, and I was like, oh my God, on a couple clips of his kind of, maybe because he's white, I don't know, because he jumped high. I was like, oh my God. Like I saw a couple of like a finger roll where he was, I mean, up there, right? He's got a clip, 43% open threes. I mean, literally every coach knows how to play the game. I mean, I love him as an organizational fit. I mean, it sounds like a pro term, but an organizational fit, I think schools should be all over him. Hopefully he stays close to home, not NC State. I've been hearing you say NC State in some of these names. It's you know, obviously we're rivals. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I know Will Wade.
You don't like it.
I know Will Wade, right? I know what he's doing. He sees Carolina on a guy, and he said, let me just sneak in there and see if I could steal one and start that rivalry strong. So I think it's a big year for NC State. If he does do well this year, it could get spooky. But right now, they're still NC State. So, you know, Cole, I don't know about that. Next up, we're going to go Bryson Howard, son of former ACC Player of the Year Josh Howard, 4-star 4 from Texas, 29th ranked player in the 2026 class. Scheduled to visit Carolina on September 5th. What are their chances, the Tar Heels' chances with this kid?
Yeah, you probably squared off with his dad a few times back
sure.
in the day. I'm sure you know Josh.
He was older, but you know,
yeah,
but was out there.
Yeah, Bryson is a really interesting one because this is a kid, amazing enough, like, okay, these kids of NBA players right now, we find them early, and because there's been so many of them, Pippen's kids, whoever, who somehow, despite being NBA players' sons, seem to be late bloomers and come on late. Now we're in this thing where we're trying to find all these guys early. Somehow, even into April, Bryson Howard didn't even have a star rating from us yet. And he's a guy that was kind of the second man on his own high school team. And I know from talking to people who know his dad, that his dad was just like, well, you know, I just hope he's good enough to get a scholarship to play somewhere. Like, there was no like, oh, I think I got a kid who's going to be a pro on my hands. And then this summer and the spring, he burst on the scene. It was like, I saw him in Phoenix and he had like 3 points and was like 1 for 5 from the field. And that was in April. Then I saw him again over Memorial Day. And it was two different human beings playing the game of basketball. Because all of a sudden he was this quietly confident kid who could make a lot of shots. So he's a player. He's one that I'm pretty sure will probably move up to 5-star status when we update the rankings here in the next week or so. His recruitment's a battle. I mentioned Rippey earlier as being one of the most intriguing recruitments. Howard, for me right now, is kind of the most intriguing recruitment in the country because you got the storyline with his dad. His dad played at Wake. Wake isn't in it, but you do have North Carolina ties through the family of the state. So, I'm sure the kid has grown up knowing about Carolina. Early on in the recruitment, when he first started to get some high major offers, the word was, you might be a little bit of a homebody. He's probably not going to leave the state of Texas. That has lightened up a bit as time has gone on. I do think you'd have to keep a close eye on Houston in Texas because they were one of the first to get in on him early. And I think he, from a playing style and a profile, he fits Kelvin Sampson pretty well, just with his toughness and athleticism. And when they get that kid in a college weight room, he's going to be a monster. But, it's one. While I would say that Houston probably has the slight edge just with what they've done over the last couple of years and developing guys and, being relatively close to home, I do think he's another one that's entering the visit process with a fairly open mind. And you're talking about a kid that wasn't expecting to get recruited by Blue Bloods, and now he's being recruited by Blue Bloods. And I think he's going to be very curious to see what that could look like for him on the college level.
Yeah, you talk about local. We talk about local a lot of times, and I think that's maybe where Arizona has found their niche, because I was in Austin, Texas. I wanted to go to Texas. Texas was a school. I was almost a lock to go to Texas. Like, if you would have asked Eric Bossi before I went to Carolina where I'm going, he probably would have said he's at Texas every weekend. I was going to the football games. But the reason why I wanted to stay home is because Texas recruited me so much harder than everyone, even though they were local. I feel like a lot of times these local schools sometimes assume that they're going to get a kid. So hopefully he wants to get out of Texas. I mean, he can shoot the ball, shot 45% from three this summer. And when I watch his stuff, a lot of contested, confident makes with the pro pedigree of his dad, just probably teaching him how to play the game the right way. And his dad being humble enough to say, "Look, man, we hope he gets a scholarship." That should tell you all you need to know about the kid, man. He's probably going to be really good coming into this
Yeah, and it's you can see it because sometimes with these NBA guys, I get it. They're so used to being in the spotlight. Sometimes when they show up to watch their kids play, it's almost still a chance to keep themselves relevant. Like, hey, everyone, look at me. I was an all-star or whatever, come get my autograph, come get pictures with me, or, but at the same time, I'm going to have security and draw a bunch. Man, he's just low-key. He has a hat on. He sits in the crowd like a regular dad. You don't hear him yelling or hooting and hollering, and that shows with his son's approach to the game. And also with Bryson, it's interesting. He's still only 16 years old as he's starting his senior year of high school. So he's another one who's really young for the class. And, man, if he's come this far in 4 months, what's going to happen in the next year and a half with that kid? It's going to be interesting. But like I said, probably Houston, give them the slight edge going in. But I do think that the blue blood thing is definitely appealing to him, and he really wants to make sure he investigates it.
Yeah, I have a son. He's about to be 3, and he's just running around doing baseball, little fun things. And I'm like him. I'm like, man, let me just sit on the side because I'm tall. Everyone knows who I am when he's running around. I'm just like, look, man, don't look over here, man. Go do your thing, man. When we get in the car, we'll talk. Like, you don't have to. So I like that approach. I think it's a great approach to take the pressure off as well. Because you don't want to. It's tough to live in the shadow sometimes of a parent. I mean, I wasn't an all-star or anything, but I was pretty good as a young age. So
yeah, it's a gift and a curse. It's people are automatically looking at you because they know who your father is, or if you have another famous parent, it just comes with the territory. But it's and I had this conversation with Tajh Ariza. I thought it was an important conversation that we don't get to talk to these kids quite as much as we used to when you came out because there's just so many people trying to grab them. But you'll have some kids that you develop a little bit better relationship. And I've got a pretty good relationship with Tajh. And I remember telling him early on in the process, like, Tajh, you have to understand, we have to bring up your father because he is your father and he has these accolades and he did this. And also when we're writing, it's our job. We have to assume that someone who's reading has never read about him before. And so they need to know the story. But I said, Tajh, you got to understand, while we will bring your dad up as a reference point, we're never going to expect you to be him, and we're not going to compare you to him because that's not fair to you. We're evaluating you as Tajh Ariza, not Trevor Ariza's son. And, I hope that other guys can keep that in mind too, because it's a really tough thing to do. And there is, it's not as easy as people think being the son of a famous player in this space. It's a lot of pressure. And, I see these kids that we have that are visiting Carolina, they seem to be handling it really well.
Yeah, I don't know if other pro dads can relate, but I pray I see the day where someone's talking mess to me like, your dad was not that good. It's not this good. And I pray to God he's better than I ever was. That is my dream. So I definitely understand that. And last but definitely not least, Maximo Adams, 4-star forward out of Cali, 40th ranked prospect in the class of 2026, scheduled to visit Carolina on Halloween, the greatest Halloween on earth, by the way, folks. Just putting that out there. If you guys want to go check out, Franklin Street and go hang out. It's a good spot. What's the latest on Carolina's pursuit of him?
This is one I think he's going to enter this process totally wide open. There hasn't really been much talk about favorites with him or anything like that. He's an interesting one. His older brother, Marcus Adams, is now at Arizona State. And talk about a wild story. His older brother came out of nowhere before his senior season, played a couple of small level events in LA. The highlight tapes got out and he looked incredible. I remember going to watch him in the fall of his senior year. I was like, oh, holy crap, this guy is really good. So he commits to Kansas, only made it through about 2 or 3 weeks in the summer at Kansas before he decided to transfer. Committed to Gonzaga, never actually made it to Gonzaga. Then ended up at BYU for a year where he redshirted. Then was at Cal State Northridge last year, and now is at Arizona State. Maxie is totally different than his brother in terms of I don't think he's going to bounce around like that. And there's that's just the new age. There's some guys that are have to find their way, but Maxie is a pretty mature kid. I think he's watched his brother and he's learned from watching his brother struggle to find the place that's right for him. That I think he's going to be really calculated in the decision-making process. And he's going to make 100% sure that he's making a decision because this is the best spot for me, not because it's the biggest name or not because I got pressured to go do this. So, his process, like I said, I think it's pretty wide open. Again, depending how you look at things, it can be great to be that deep into the visit process because that way what's happened with all the other visits and you know how to play it. But you always run the risk of, man, I've been on 6 trips. I don't want to go take another trip, because it sounds cool, but official visits they're fun, but they're exhausting too. So
they want to show you everything. They want to show you everything. They want to take you around campus. They want to show you the library because your mama's there. And they want to show you the gym because your dad's there. And we got dinner here. And I think for me, the reason why Carolina was such a great visit for me is because of just the family environment. They kind of didn't stress me out too much, and I got to hang with some of the players. So hopefully they've kept that tradition of just, making it a fun time and thinking about the player more than the people around the player. I like this kid, man. I think he's, versatile wing, right? Pick and pop guy, kind of sneaky athlete, great player. I think system is important. And so for you to say that he's going to really sit down and see what their best fit is, I think that's good for him as a player. I can see him going to a system that works for him and thriving, and a system that doesn't work for him and not thriving. So we'll see what that looks like in the future.
Yeah, fit is so important. Fit is still important. I think I get the money aspect on this thing, and I get wanting to get as much as you can. Like that. Trust me, I get it. When we see the numbers that are being thrown around to these guys, hey, if someone will give me 1.2 million, I can get 1.5 million somewhere else. I'm gonna go with 1.5 million. But I think what's being lost in this is I hope these guys are still being sure about fit and just not the highest dollar. Because if you're a legitimate NBA prospect, where you go to school and how you fit there is going to have an extreme impact on where you were drafted. And if you make the wrong fit because they paid you a couple $100,000 more than the place that was a better fit, maybe if you'd gone to the right fit, you would have gotten less money in year 1 or year 2, but you might have been drafted in the top 10, 15 in the draft. But because you made a poor choice, you got a couple $100,000 on the front end, but you dropped at the end of the first round or out of the second round because it was a terrible fit. And now people are questioning you, and you just cost yourself $15, $20 million on your first contract. So this is a very interesting thing to play. And this is where I think Jim Tanner and Hubert can be huge assets for Carolina. Hubert having played in the NBA and the experience Jim Tanner has in negotiating NBA contracts. I would imagine that this has to be a huge focus of them on these visits of, we firmly believe you're a fit here. Here's why you're a fit. And here's how important it is if you're going to be an NBA guy to get that fit. I'm of the opinion that the guys who are just making a decision for purely financial reasons, maybe aren't quite as sure they're going to be an NBA player as they like to project. Because if you really think you're that dude, you're going to go to the place that fits you the best. You're not going to run from the competition, and you're going to go to the place that truly prepares you the best for the NBA. Now, that's going to be a different school for every kid.
Yep.
But for Carolina in this process, it's finding out, how do we drive that home that we're going to be the best spot for you on this.
Yeah, I mean, Jim negotiated my extension, so I'm team Jim Tanner for sure. And that's the biggest thing I think with the money. People, are going to crucify me because maybe my perspective's messed up. But I'll be honest with you, 17 years old, making $1.5 million. It's not. It's yes, you're going to be okay, and it could be generational for your family and your situation. But considering that I was the 14th pick in my draft, my contract was a little under $9 million, and now the 14th pick is getting $20 million. So you guys do the math. If you become a first-round pick, you're getting almost $10 million, right? So you have to put in perspective sometimes the money and the fit. And right, okay, if you think you're going to be a 4-year guy, you can run it up. But if you're going to be a 4-year guy, you're probably not getting the money on the top end anyway. So I challenge kind of players sometimes think like, hey, look, if you like you said, Bossi, if you're that guy, go somewhere where you're going to thrive, because you know what? That 1 million or let's say 2 million, right, for those high level prospects, but it's all relative because that $2 million prospect is probably an NBA guy, right? So I hope everyone kind of finds their niche, gets to the money, get your financial guy. If I could go back and just for NIL advice, people always ask me, hey, well, I had a kid come to me and say, look, I'm getting $750K. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what to do. I said, look, if I could go back, I would have probably hired a financial guy. At 18, if I had $1 million, hire a financial guy, maybe buy a house right where I'm from, let that accrue as I go through my career, something like that. So I'm super excited to see what these kids are doing with their money, and I'm happy for them because they deserve it. I mean, they're branding themselves. So want to say thank you. We went long today, but we had a lot to talk about. And goodbye to Eric Bossi, who I've known for over 20 years. And I just remember him patrolling the sidelines and just being a great guy and easy to talk to. And we had a lot of conversations. So it's kind of full circle moment while you always treat people the right way and you never know what could come of it. That's why me and him are here together, man, in this situation, man. 20 plus 30 years into the game, right? Like I don't think people realize, man, like you Kingwood Classic in those hallways, like people don't know, like right now, but people don't know, man. You used to really, I'm sure you had a lot of mileage on the cars. So thanks for being here.
26 years. It's been a lot of gyms and a lot of games and a lot of players. And, like I say, it's definitely a full circle moment. It's when they said, hey, you want to do this podcast, John, I was like, yeah, of course. And I think John is actually one of those guys who actually remembers me because we had a pretty good relationship back then. Like I said, we ran each other's Final Four. So definitely, I'm looking forward to being on again. It's fun watching you do this stuff. It's certainly, you got a lot of time to figure out what to do with now, with the playing days over and, you get to run around, watch your kid, obviously.
Yeah.
Still be doing this by the time he's old enough to be on my radar. But if I do, I'm going to be watching you closely, and I'm going to give you a lot of hell if you're acting out on it.
Listen, if you're still in the game, you're going to be my liaison. We're going to work together. So it'll work out. So hey, thanks to everyone for watching on YouTube, listening wherever you get your podcast at. Be sure to check out TarHeel247.com for the latest wall-to-wall coverage of Carolina athletics with the football team open up their season next Monday against TCU, the beginning of the Belichick era. That's going to be fun to watch. TarHeel247.com is your source for all things Carolina. See you next week.